In this video, I want to talk about blocking in, what it is, why it's useful, and what tools I use to do the job. To do that, I'm going to use a resource from the Drippy Cat Art Studio, come down to 8 practice files, and I have a file here called Art Studio Sketch. It is a Procreate file. I will load that up, and I have this. It's very, very simple. I have my background color, that's plain white. I will keep it at that for now. And I have a layer here called layer 1. That is where my sketch is on. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is rename this to sketch, because naming your layers is going to make your life so much easier. Finger on there, swipe to the left. I'm going to lock that layer. I do not want to be drawing on that layer. The next thing, I will come to my plus sign and I will add a new layer. I'll take it underneath. And this is going to be my blocking in layer. Now let me show you what I mean by this. I'll show you one I did earlier. Here you go, the Art Studio blocked. If I come here, I have my sketch layer that is selected. I have a draw here. I will be using that to start doing my drawing, but I have this other layer here called blocked. That is where I blocked in all of my artwork. The reason is, one of the core skills when you are learning digital art is how to control your brushes. Let me show you what I mean. Let's come to draw here. Let's try something from the painterly section. Let's try DC slap it on. Nice bright color, nice bright red, and there you go. Let's increase the opacity. Wonderful texture there. Let's add a bit more color in there. I mean, great, look at that. Now let's undo that. Let's 3-finger swipe down and clear my layer. Now, supposing I wanted to draw on that board, the Drippy Cat Art Studio wooden board. So I'll choose a very similar red color, zoom in, and now here I come with my wonderful texture. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. It's going over the edge. All right, let's make things smaller. Well, I can do that, but I prefer to have the bigger stroke like this, and it's going over the border, and this is a problem, and that is the problem. This brush I'm using is there to emulate either a big messy paintbrush or a sponge or some crumpled paper. And when you hold that in your hand, you can see very clearly where the edges are of that sponge or that piece of crumpled paper or that big old paintbrush. But what you're drawing with is basically, it's a plastic pencil with a very fine nib. And so if I make my brush size really small, the size of my nib is about that big. And I can control that easily because I can see what I'm putting down is the same size as the edge of my nib. But the problem is, once I start making it big, I've got my tiny little nib, but also I've got a huge area of color which I'm trying to put down. So you don't have the level of control with your little plastic pencil that you do with that big paintbrush or the bit of crumpled paper or whatever it is you're putting effects down. So 3-finger swipe down to clear that layer. And so it follows that you've got to find different ways of controlling the flow of paint. Let me tell you one right off the top of my head. Look, there's my splodge. If I come to my erase tool and I can come to something like General DC Line Blocker Inner, which is a very hard edge, no nonsense brush. Once I've made that big red expressive brush stroke, I can come in and just erase everything. Digital art is not like traditional art. You can erase anything you want and it won't leave any kind of mark afterwards. But that can be a little bit of a long-winded affair. Sometimes you will want an area, like your blocked in area, to control the borders of your big expressive paintbrush strokes. And it can help in a couple of ways. Let's just slide to the left and unlock this layer. And if I tap on my little icon, which I'm circling, I have a list of options. I can come to Alpha Lock and press it. Now, when a layer has Alpha Lock turned on, it means you can only draw on that layer where there are already pixels. You cannot draw on any transparent pixels. And that is just as well because that blocked layer has that kind of blue color. Those are the only pixels on this layer. So if I come to, let's try another brush. Let's try DC Square Texture 1. Let's try a slightly more woody color. And let's come and start drawing. And you can see I'm making nice, free, large brush strokes. Let's choose a different lighter color. And because the alpha lock is turned on, I only draw where there are already pixels on this layer. And so I get to use these nice, big, expressive brushes to create all kinds of lovely textures. Let's try DC Square Texture 2 in a different color. But because of the alpha lock, the edges are controlled and I get the best of both worlds. I'll two-finger tap a few times with this. I'm holding down two fingers. That undoes very, very rapidly. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to have the layer underneath, that's called Draw Here. If I tap again where I'm circling, I can come to something called Clipping Mask. This works in a very similar way to the alpha lock. I can only draw in certain areas, but the difference is, with the Clipping Mask, I can only draw where there are pixels on the layer below, the layer that I am clipped to. And you can tell which layer it is because you get that little arrow pointing to the left and down, just to the left-hand side of the layer icon. And so now with this, let's choose our paintbrush again, DC Square Texture 2, and as before, good times. I can paint in as much as I want here. And in case you're thinking, I've still got that blue in the background, I don't like it. Well, look, come to the layer underneath, the blocked layer. Swipe to the left and press unlock. And if I come to where I'm circling in the top left, I have my adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness. I get 3 sliders at the bottom. So if I take this layer and I come to my brightness slider and I crank it all the way up so that this layer becomes white, that blocked layer has now effectively become invisible. And come on, let's make a mistake. Let's go, great, carry on working. And oh, hang on. Two-finger tap to undo. I'm still on my blocked layer. I need to come back up to my Draw Here layer, and there you go. Okay, so I've colored this in ridiculously quickly. But here's one difference between alpha lock and the Draw Here layer. If I come to my Draw Here layer, which is clipped, tap on the icon again and tap on Clipping Mask to undo it, watch what happens. Oh, look at that. All those brush strokes that I was making, which were hidden because the Draw Here layer was clipped to the block layer underneath, suddenly become visible. If I come and tap again on the Draw Here layer icon and turn on Clipping Mask, those areas get hidden again. Now, using the clipping layer means you use an extra layer, and I don't know how many layers you can have on your particular iPad. So it's one extra layer to think about, but this is a definite advantage. Because supposing I decide I want to make 1 or 2 edits to my blocked layer. I'm not quite happy with the shape of that sign. Well, if I'd used alpha lock, then I'd have paint up to the borders and then that's it. There's nothing beyond. So I've got to try and match up that quite interesting texture and colour and try and extend it outwards. I'm not sure about that. But if I come to the blocked layer and I can choose any brush I want, let's try, I was using the DC line blocker in. And for this, I'll just paint in white, which my blocked in layer, that's its current colour. So I'll come to my classic palette, drag right up to the top left, that's white. And I'm going to make a few brush strokes. Oh, look at that. The Draw Here layer has a whole load of spare brushstrokes which went beyond the edge of any pixels on my blocked layer. They're still there, they're just hiding. But if I start to make some more brushstrokes on my blocked layer, they become visible again. Similarly, if I come to my Erase tool, what's that on? DC Line Blocker Inner, and I come in again, I can hide them. And then I think, what was I thinking? That was a terrible idea. Come back to my paintbrush. And let's make it a bit bigger, shall we? And I can paint those areas in again. This gives a huge amount of flexibility. So blocking in areas and then using the clipping mask is going to give you a lot of flexibility. Just one more thing, if I add an extra layer and I tap on the icon and come to clipping mask again, and this time let's come to Painterly, let's try DC Square Texture 3 and let's try a very different color. Let's try green color just to show you this. There you go. You can stack clipping layers on top of another layer, in our case the blocked layer. So this is one reason why blocking in is going to be very useful. It lets you control your paint, and let's face it, with the kind of brushes we are using at the moment, you need to have some way of controlling them. Okay, so coming back to our sketch, how do we do that blocked in layer? Well, look, I will make it invisible. I will create a new layer and I'll use that to block in on. And in the Drippy Cat Art Studio, I have a couple of brushes here which are especially designed for this kind of work. Let's just turn off my blocked in layer and work on our new layer. I currently have DC Line Blocker Inner. This is designed to do exactly this kind of work. So let's come to our billboard poster. Make sure your opacity is set to 100%. I'll choose another color for this. Come to palettes, come to DC Drawing Colors. This color on the bottom row, second in from the right, that's kind of something called Process Blue. I'm not going to explain what that is, but there you go. You can draw like this. If you want your brush a little bit finer, decrease the size. Opacity on 100%. You want this to be completely covering the area. I'm not going to go all the way around the poster. I'll just do a small area. I'll come around like this. Then come up to my color, which I'm circling, and use my pen or my finger to drag and drop, and it floods. In general, you want your threshold, which I'm circling now, to be as high as possible. That's too high. It jumped over the edges, but then take it back just a little bit to about there. The reason being is if your threshold is set low, even with a very hard edge brush like this, you're going to start to see some slight ghosting just around the edges, which I spoke about in a previous video. So there you go. The other way of doing it is to use the DC Hard Blocker Inner. It's still got the same hard edge. Let's make it even smaller. But with this one, let's go off track a little bit. If I press harder, you can see it gets quite big quite fast. And so by varying the pressure, now I'm hardly any pressure. And again, come here, very light amount of pressure. Then when I come down, I'd decide, oh, come on. There's not enough hours in the day, so I press hard and I get a much bigger brush stroke like this. When you're blocking in, I suggest you do it in sections. What you don't do is go all the way around this entire poster thinking, great, I'll switch off and just go all the way around, because sooner or later you might go over an edge that you didn't mean to. Like, for example, look, supposing I'm doing this and I've spent about 5 minutes carefully tracing all the way around, then all of a sudden, oh, I made a little mistake. Well, if I've spent 5 minutes making that one brush stroke and I press undo, that's 5 minutes worth of work wasted. So do it in sections. See how I'm doing now? But get to the edge. Okay, that is completely enclosed. So now I can just drag and drop like this. Or if I'm using, say, the Hard Blocker Inner brush, I can simply just increase my pressure. Now, one thing you will see people do, supposing I've got to, say, this corner here, where there's a little bit of a tight corner and I want to come here and, oh, it's not quite tight enough, they'll start making the brush size very small to try and fit in and create a sharp edge like this. And then the brush size is small, it's getting fiddly. You don't need to do that. Look, supposing I come to this edge here, I can make it blurry if I like this, because all I need to do is come to my erase tool, which I am circling, tap and hold just for a second or two. And because I tapped and held, I get the same brush I was painting with. Now I can erase with. Make it nice and small, and I can erase like this. This is how you'll do sharp corners. Don't start making your brush size smaller and smaller and smaller to get that sharp pointy edge. Just paint on and erase off, and you will completely erase the mark. And that's what you do. You go around like this. If you want a fuzzy edge on this, supposing I had a soft, furry sign, well, look, I can come to fur and hair. Let's try fur frizzy. Let's make it quite a bit smaller. And I can put on my fuzzy edge like that. Supposing I wanted to cut in, tap and hold on my erase tool, and I can cut away furry sections so I can have a furry sign. Just what everybody wanted. But look, this is the basics, and sooner or later you will get a blocked in layer like this, and that's really going to help you control your brush strokes.